Summary of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie by Shaffer. Juliet, a young writer who lives in London, sends a letter to Sydney, her friend and editor. In the letter, she explains that she has lost interest in her current book project and that she no longer wants to publish under the pseudonym Izzy Bickerstaff, which she used during World War II. Soon after that, Juliet goes on a tour to sell Izzy Bickerstaff Goes to War, the book she wrote under a fake name. During the trip, she has a short conversation with Gilly Gilbert, a gossip writer. Gilly tries to get Juliet to say bad things about her engagement to Lieutenant Rob Darcy, but Juliet throws a teapot at him. Later, Juliet tells Sydney that she and Rob broke up because he tried to move her books to the basement and put sports trophies in their place. Juliet starts getting flowers from a guy named Mark Reynolds while she is on tour. Juliet is on a tour, but Sydney calls her home early because the Times wants her to write 3 pieces about reading. Someone named Darcy Adams begins to write to Juliet. He has an old copy of a Charles Lamb book that she gave him, and he wants help finding more by the same author. He has a home in Guernsey. He gets her attention by telling her that he is a member of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, a group of writers that started with an illegal roast pig when the Germans were in charge. Juliet is interested, so she helps Darcy find more books by Lamb and asks him what the society and the pig are all about. He agrees and tells them that the society started after the pig roast, when he, John Booker, and Elizabeth McKenna were caught staying out past bedtime. Elizabeth made up the society as a cover story, but the Germans wanted to join, so they had to start it. Juliet wants to write about the society for her Times pieces, so Darcy asks his friend Amelia of Moggery to write to Juliet. Amelia is worried that Juliet will make fun of the society after reading Izzy, but Juliet asks Reverend Simon Simplice and Lady Bella Taunton for references on her character. Amelia tells Julia more about the society when she is satisfied, and her friend Isola also writes to Juliet. Juliet tries to tell Sydney about her new pen pals, but she finds out that he has run away to Australia to take care of their friend Piers, who suddenly ended up there in 1943 after being shot down over Burma. Juliet starts dating Mark while Sydney is away, which is even longer when Sydney breaks his leg. Even though Mark is a jerk, he is good-looking, rich, and American. Several other members of the society write messages to Juliet. Eben tells Juliet that he didn't like reading much until he found Shakespeare. He also tells Juliet about his grandson Eli and how all the children of Guernsey had to leave before the Germans came. Clovis says in his book that he was able to court and marry the widow Hubert after he learned about poems. Booker only reads the letters of Seneca, but he says that the society kept him from becoming a drunk. Juliet starts to find out about Elizabeth McKenna through these letters. As a child, she first went to Guernsey because her mother worked for Sir Ambrose. Elizabeth ran wild and met Eben's daughter, Jane. She went back to the island to close up Sir Ambrose's house right before the attack. Since Jane was pregnant and on bed rest, she decided to stay. When the Germans bombed Guernsey, Jane died. Elizabeth became a nurse, came up with a plan for her partly Jewish servant Booker to pretend to be Lord Tobias, and fell in love with a German soldier, Christian Hellman. Everyone says nice things about Christian. He helped the people on the island and planned to get married to Elizabeth when the war was over. But a few months before Elizabeth had Kit, Christian was sent to France to work in a hospital and died there. Elizabeth was put in jail and sent to the mainland in 1944 because she helped one of the tote workers. No one is sure where she is right now. Kit, who is now 4 years old, is cared for by the society as a group. Juliet also gets letters from a woman named Miss Adelaide Addison. She thinks it's her job to let Juliet know that Elizabeth was a spoiled brat. Juliet still dates Mark even though she is still writing to her friends in Guernsey. He takes her out every night, even if she says she would rather stay in. Susan and Juliet beg Sydney to come home, and Juliet tells Sydney about her study on Guernsey. Darcy tells Juliet how he became friends with Christian. He and Christian talk about how much they love to read and how much they like Charles Lamb. Amelia tells Juliet about the slaves who built the bunkers on the island. These people were called tote workers. The Germans kept them from getting food, and the bunkers remind Amelia of the horrible things the Nazis did. Isola asks Juliet a few questions about her life. Juliet answers all of them and tells them that she lost her parents when she was 12 and moved in with her great-uncle, Dr. Ashton. He sent her to boarding school after she tried to run away twice, where she met her best friend, Sophie. Juliet and Sophie stayed together after school and worked in bookstores together. Now, Sophie lives in Scotland with her husband and kid. Her son has a nanny who is Juliet. Juliet says that she has an admirer, but she isn't sure if she likes him or not. Mark insists on going out with Juliet and pops the question. In a letter, she says that she didn't really say no, she just needs time to think. Juliet writes to Sophie later and tells her about the plan. By yelling at her to say yes, Mark made Juliet cry. She wonders if she's dumb for not accepting and says she wants to write about the occupation in Guernsey. She asks Sydney if she can go to Guernsey, and he says that she can. Everyone in Guernsey is excited to have Juliet, so they get to work fixing up Elizabeth's house. Isola tells everyone she knows to write Juliet about the occupation, and letters pour in. An animal lover writes about how the US killed most of Guernsey's house pets, and Sally and Frobisher writes about Elizabeth's skills as a nurse. Micah Daniels tells Juliet about the food boxes sent by the British that, amazingly, the Germans didn't steal. Booker writes to Juliet to let her know that he really did spend a year in a prison camp after his lie was found out. Mark tries one last time to stop Juliet from going to Guernsey, but she still goes. Juliet knows everyone as soon as she walks in the door. Even though Kit is cold at first, by the end of the night she is warmed up to Juliet. Juliet goes on a tour of the island and shows up at a society meeting. She gets more letters from people in the area about the attack, and when she hears that Sydney is in London, she asks him to come visit. She tells him that Kit has been living with her and that the two of them have been playing a scary game called Dead Bride. She tells Sydney to send Kit some paper dolls. The toys are sent by Bill Lee B. Jones, who is now Sydney's new secretary. A French woman called Remy writes a letter to the society. Remy writes to say that Elizabeth was her friend at the Ravensbrück concentration camp and that she was killed in March 1945. Elizabeth stood up for a woman who was being hurt because she was having her period. Sister Touvier, Remy's nurse, writes in the letter that Remy is very sick, but she hopes that the message will help her get better. Amelia and Darcy ask if they can come see Juliet, and her friends on the island of Guernsey are sad. Since Kit is now an orphan, Juliet worries about what will happen to her. She also tells Mark he can't come see her. Darcy and Amelia stop by to see Remy, and Juliet takes care of Kit. Even though Remy is very weak, she wants to move to Paris. Darcy, on the other hand, would like Remy to come to Guernsey. Juliet tries to keep Kit's life normal by asking Sydney to come over. He says he will come this weekend. While Sydney is in Guernsey, he writes to Sophie that it is clear that Darcy and Juliet love each other and that Kit loves Juliet. Sydney reads Juliet's work when he gets back to London. He suggests that she tell Elizabeth's story. Juliet starts asking people about Elizabeth, and she finds some of Elizabeth's drawings when she does so. Juliet writes to Sophie and tells her that she loves Darcy. But Mark showed up out of the blue and ruined everything. The next day, Juliet wrote another letter in which she said that she had said no to Mark for the last time when he said that the locals were pushing her to take care of Kit. Soon after that, Juliet finds out that Elizabeth and a man named Peter Sawyer were arrested for helping a tote employee named Lud Jaruski. Peter was able to go back to Guernsey, but after Elizabeth and Lud were arrested, he never heard from them again. Darcy talks Remy into coming to Guernsey and asks Juliet to spend time with Remy because her sunny personality will be good for Remy. Juliet thinks this means Darcy doesn't love her. But she finds that she does like Remy. Sydney sends Isola a book on phrenology during this time. Not long after that, Isola reads letters to her grandmother Fien that Juliet thinks Oscar Wilde wrote. This is confirmed by an expert, and Isola asks Sydney if she can write the introduction if he decides to print the letters. Bill Leby tells Juliet that Sydney has sent her to get the letters, and Juliet tells Sophie that she'd like to try to adopt Kit. A few days later, Susan tells Juliet that Bill Leby is working with Gilly Gilbert, so Juliet shouldn't let her take the letters. Bill Leby tried to steal the letters, but Isola and Kit locked her up in Isola's smokehouse before she could. Juliet writes to Sydney and tells him about a terrible thing that happened. Remy had a terrible panic attack when he saw a German shepherd while he was walking along the rocks. Later, Darcy said that guards used to put dogs on prisoners. Juliet starts to wonder if Darcy loves her, and Sydney plans to come back to the island. Soon before Sydney arrives, Amelia lets Juliet adopt Kit, and Kit gives Juliet a box of hidden riches. It has things that remind her of her parents. Juliet and Darcy have dinner together, but Juliet is upset when she sees Darcy shopping with Remy for a bag the next day. Isola wrote in a notebook that Sydney gave her that she was going to watch her friends like Miss Marple. She can tell that something is wrong with Remy and Darcy, but she doesn't know what it is. Isola notices that when Sydney comes, he and Darcy look at each other in a strange way. She is worried when Juliet falls back at Eben's party when Eben says that Remy is going back to France. She thinks that Darcy must be in love with Remy but is too shy to tell her because he looks sad. Isola offers to clean Darcy's house so that she can find signs that Darcy loves her. Isola doesn't find any evidence that Darcy loves Remy, but she does find Juliet's letters, photos, and a handkerchief. Isola tells Juliet this sad news, and Juliet asks Darcy to marry her right away. In her final letter, Juliet asks Sydney to come back to Guernsey so that he can be the one to give her away at her wedding.
About the author. Marion Shaffer was born in the West Virginia city of Martinsburg. She went to college in Ohio at Miami University and got married in 1958. Shaffer had 2 girls after she and her husband moved to California. Shaffer worked as a clerk in a bookstore, a library, and at Harper & Row, first as a receptionist and then as an editor over the course of her life. In 1980, when Shaffer went to Cambridge to do research for a biography of Kathleen Scott, he came up with the idea for Guernsey. When Shaffer found out that Scott's personal papers couldn't be used, she chose to spend part of her trip in Guernsey. However, the airport in Guernsey closed because of fog, and she was stuck there. She read about the German occupation of the island in the airport's shop, but she didn't start writing the story until 20 years later. As soon as the book was picked up for release, Shaffer's editor asked for a lot of changes. Shaffer had cancer at the time, so she asked her niece Annie Barrows, who wrote books for kids, to finish the book. Guernsey was published posthumously in Shaffer's year of death.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.